Hello everyone, my name is Kate and I'm the creator of the YouTube channel BraapT7, and here you can find a mix of content such as travel films, gear reviews and instructional videos, all based around my Yamaha T7.
Welcome to the Real Riders Podcast. My name's Simon Josie, and if this is your first time here, welcome and thanks for listening. I came across the BraapT7 YouTube channel a couple of years ago, and for a while now I've been wanting to speak to Kate, who created the channel and started posting videos to it in November 2021. Kate's enthusiasm for motorcycling, particularly off-road riding, is clear if you watch her videos. I wanted to understand her motivation for capturing it on camera and publishing to YouTube. Before we get to my chat with Kate, let me remind you that the podcast has an account on Instagram where you will find, amongst other things, trailers for each new episode. And if you want to know what I've been watching recently, follow along the Real Riders account on Blue Sky. Links for both the Instagram and Blue Sky accounts are in the show notes. Finally, if you have the time and inclination, please consider rating or liking the Real Riders podcast in your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. This will help other listeners find the podcast. Righto, let's get to my talk with Kate. Welcome to the podcast, Kate. Thanks for joining me on the show today. How are you?
Thank you to have me in your show. And yeah, I'm pretty fine today. Thank you.
Okay, my first question is about how you got into motorcycling, and I want you to tell me, what's your very first memory of motorcycles?
Oh, yeah, it's a very good question because I had a lot of kind of memories. But once I heard in some specific person who is knowing about these things that not all the memories are real memories. Some are just nostalgic based on what you heard later. So I was thinking about this, and most likely my first memory is that my mother picks me up. I was very little, maybe 2 or 3 years old. It's cold. My jacket leaves my waist open. It's very cold. And she puts me in between my father and her on the motorcycle, and we are driving like this home from the kindergarten. So this is my first fragment memory of riding a motorbike.
And was this in Hungary?
Yes, back many years ago.
Okay.
When it was still available, riding motorcycle like this.
Oh, yeah, I can understand that. So that means there was motorcycling in your family. So tell me about that. Who rode motorcycles in your family?
Yeah, it started with my father, of course, because, we were poor, very poor, and he couldn't afford to have a car. And, he always had a motorbike, and he used it for everyday travel, for commute to work. And also we traveled with that to holidays and such things.
Can you remember, or do you know what type of motorcycle it was?
Yes, it was a Hungarian brand. It was a Pannonia P21, I think. It was a twin-cylinder something, but 2-stroke. It was a very interesting bike, and the Hungarians are very proud about this bike because this was kind of competent with the Western motorbikes at that time.
Right. And then how did you get into motorcycling yourself?
Yeah, myself, it was a first time when my father had a Simpson. Maybe someone heard it because it was a DDR motorbike. It's a Deutsche Demokratische Republik motorbike. It's a 50cc, but it was pretty heavy, I think, almost 100 kilogram or 80 or something. And one day, somehow, I just asked my father if I can learn to ride motorbike. And he put me on and helped me push because my legs barely touched the ground or couldn't even touch the ground, and just big cycles in the fields around to learn how to ride the motorbike.
Did that help develop your interest in off-road riding, or did off-road riding come later?
I think it developed, but the real enthusiasm about off-road riding come much later, I think. My family, the whole family, not just my father, even the cousins and such a great family, everyone was always around the off-road motorsport. And this way, I was able to try the motocross machines in the paddocks, even later the enduro machines, and in the latest times, even I tried trial motorbikes, which is maybe the most difficult to control. But they are all fun in their own way. So I always was lurking around the paddocks at the motocross and enduro and such an events. And there were guys who already raced small 50cc motorbikes. And yeah, since I was a girl interesting about these motorbikes, people happily leaned me, usually the bike, just let me ride in the paddock around. And when the race was finished and, everyone was interested about the ceremonies and packing and such things, some people just let me ride after hours around the paddock. And yeah, it was a great fun for me because, I was kind of in the middle of the show that time. And the first time when I was able to do the license, it was when I was 16. And I made it first for the 150cc limit. And after 1 year, I was able to get the unlimited driving license.
So what was your first bike then? Once you got your full unrestricted license, what was your first bike?
My first motorbike, what was viable for street too, it was a Yamaha Tenere 600. What a surprise. And yes, the love for the Tenere started right then.
I mean, I know that you talk a lot about, or you discuss the T7 on your channel quite a lot, but are there other bikes that you actually look at and go, maybe that other bike would be slightly better for the kind of riding I do? Because it's quite a big bike, isn't it, for off-roading?
Yes, it's huge, and especially for the size of me, because my legs barely can touch the ground, maybe only tippy toes on both sides. And when the T7 starts so lean, it's super heavy, it just falls flat. And I'm not even strong enough to pick it up. So when I want to pick it up alone, it's a great challenge. And usually it's the end of the day riding because it exhausts me that much.
Yeah.
And yes, I was searching a lot for a viable motorbike today, which would be able to be better for me for this kind of riding. And the only candidate what I finished is the KTM 690. But as you might see in my video, it's a KTM.
Yeah. So is that a irrational dislike of KTM, or is it really, in your mind, quite a rational decision to avoid KTM? And is that at the moment, or in the future, would you reconsider a KTM, or do you think you'll never be interested in KTM?
Once I will find a KTM which is reliable and predictable to ride. So the KTM is revved up to the top, everything. The suspension is superb, the engine is super strong, and it's a very good motorbike. But it's not reliable and not easy to ride. And I want easy to ride motorbike and reliable one motorbike, because for me it's more important than riding 10 or even 20% more faster, more stronger, because I just want to enjoy to ride motorbike as much as possible. With all the motorbike riding experiences, including the controlling the bike. And this is why I picked the T7, because there are not much electronics in it.
Okay.
There is ABS, but I can turn it off pretty easily. But other than that, there is nothing else. Even the throttle is cable throttle. There is no automatic shifting something or fast shifting. And yeah, I must control the motorbike. And when I make something wrong, it's my fault if I drop the bike and not because some malfunction in the computer. Or, or when traction control, that's it. That's the greatest monster for me. So forget to turn in 20% or 40% or something. The traction, no. Traction control is in my hands, and yeah.
Has that in some way affected your skill development? Because it's quite a big bike for you, as you say specifically. Has that meant you've had to really develop your skill as opposed to maybe strength? So maybe you rely more on skill to control it than just bare strength.
Yes, I must control it only with the skills. So my weight is too light for that, because if my 70 kilogram is front or back on the 200 kilogram motorbike, it doesn't do much. It does something, but not as much as, for example, if Paul Torres puts his weight and body height front and back on the motorbike. So I must control the T7 mostly with the throttle, with the clutch and the brakes. And yeah, it's pretty much challenging on off-road, especially when it's slippery. And it gives an extra spice for the riding, and it's fun.
You give the impression through your videos that you think a lot about riding and riding skill and riding development. And I just wondered, have you done any training, like off-road training?
You mean teaching or learning?
Learning.
Learning? No, as I said, I was always around the paddock. And there were not only races, but I was around even training camps and such things. And since I was a funny little girl lurking around, I always listened what the trainers said to the professional pilots. And it interested me pretty much. And later, when I had the opportunity to ride such a motorbikes, I always tried what they said. And sometimes it worked, sometimes I crashed.
And I assume that because you started so young, you were crashing quite early as well, and you probably got over any fear of crashing. Is that right?
I never had fear of crashing, I think. Maybe later, now with the T7. But even this time, I don't have fear of the crash. I have fear that I have picked up the motorbike. When you drop the motorbike, you just jump off and try to roll, and something happens. Sometimes you break your hand, but after a rest and heal, you can ride again. So not a big deal.
Okay. What's the motorcycling scene or culture like in Hungary? I realize I know very little about Hungary and even less about motorcycling in Hungary. So what's the scene like there?
I think it's almost the same like anywhere else. There are people who are enthusiasts, there are people who just want to get money from it, and they are fighting each other all the time because some organizations just want to rip off the organizers, and the majority of the riders just want to ride for fun and for free and open events, But these people are coming together, usually 200, 300 people, to ride off-road somewhere without any license, without any police help and no ambulance and such. And yeah, with 200 people on off-road, it's not manageable. So they are always fighting each other. And as you know, Hungary is pretty much flat. There are not much forests and nice, interesting tracks. And it's really hard to find a track where you can ride for fun, freely off-road.
But there is a TET in Hungary, isn't there?
Oh, yes, there is. And it's funny, I think, because maybe in Hungary are one of the most tracks of the TET, because there are a lot of different and short tracks around here. Even if most of the tracks are just leading next to the fields and crops and so, because people want to ride here off-road a lot, they must use every opportunity to be able to do so. So maybe this is why there are so many interesting tracks.
Okay. But we've seen from your videos that you have a real interest in Italy. So what's that about? Is it the motorcycling that's drawn you to Italy?
No, not only the motorbikes, the food and the beautiful culture, the medieval culture especially, and even the ancient one. And yeah, the landscape. I love the Apennines because that's the most interesting hill in Europe for me. And even the climate is very comfortable. So I'm in love with Italy. And so it seems I started to move to Italy too this year. It will take time, of course, but I hope I will be able to put my home to Italy.
And what have you noticed about the motorcycling culture in Italy compared to Hungary?
Oh, it's much more organized. So there are tons of events, like these amateur events, like rallies and such things, because there are a lot of very comfortable and viable off-roads. Many gravel roads with wonderful vistas, and they are just fun and not too difficult. You can find your own track, and even food is super, as I said before. And the organization is just perfect. They have the good coverage of help if you drop the motorbike or have some injury. And even if it's a bit expensive, but I think it's worth it.
And just talking about riding in general, do you have a preference for riding alone or riding solo or riding with other people?
I think it doesn't matter, because when I ride alone, I have the freedom to stop whenever I want, to spend any time, to make photos, videos, drones, whatever I want, or just gazing to something. But it's dangerous, especially when I want to try new tracks, and I like to try new difficult tracks, and it's very dangerous to do that alone. So I usually like to do that in groups when I ride with friends or some events like last time in Italy, because then I am much more free to try new difficulties on the tracks, because something happens, someone will pick me up eventually.
And does that have any impact on filmmaking? How have you found the filmmaking when you're traveling by yourself or when you're traveling with a group? Is there a big difference?
Yes, there is. Because when I ride in groups, I have not the time to do all the shots and compositions, because I have to keep up with the others. For example, I was in Italy, I was riding with Marco, and there was a wonderful abandoned railway station, There were no more rails, only the ruined railway station and even a ruined bridge and everything. It was a superb scenery to do some drone shots, but we had no time for that, because he had ideas where we still need to go and reach that. And my creativity was limited by that.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I noticed about the first video that you posted to YouTube, which was on the 21st of November 2021, is that you incorporated multiple camera angles into what was a pretty simple little video of you riding off-road. I think this is actually what initially grabbed my interest, because the fact that you incorporated multiple angles suggests to me that even back then, with your very first video, that you were ambitious to try something a little bit different. A lot of people who make their first video and put it onto YouTube, a similar kind of video, would just have a simple point of view. But actually you had set up cameras in various different places to capture the different angles, honestly, to make it a little bit more interesting. What can you remember about making that first video, at least the first video that you published to your channel?
Oh my God, that was fun. I went out. That was a track what was familiar for me, and I thought it will be interesting to show how difficult it is. And I wanted to show the most aspects as I just can. And I was searching for the best camera angles to show it. And yeah, I just wrote this section or track several times because I had back then, I think, only one camera or two. So I had always put in the new angle the cameras. What was the most difficult, parking the motorbike. Because all the time I had to find the spot where the motorbike doesn't roll off, doesn't fall off, and walking to the camera in the sun, hot sun, I think it was pretty much hot, and putting the camera in the new angle, walking back to the motorbike, starting the motorbike, and the camera was already rolling. And when everything, the footage was done, then I went back home and I had footages about, I don't know, 10 minutes long, and the action was 6 seconds or 10 seconds. And it was horrible to make that video, I remember that. But I think the final result was worth it.
So it sounded like you were pretty surprised by that experience. Why'd you keep doing it then? So this gets to me trying to find out why you make videos and put them on YouTube, because yeah, it's a lot of work, and arguably it takes away the pleasure of the motorcycle ride, but you kept doing it. So why'd you keep doing it?
I think because I wanted to make it better. And since I am kind of artist, I would say, it's also fun for me, because making videos, it's kind of painting a picture or doing something to create something, And creating such a video is also the sensation of the creation. And yeah, since I usually ride alone most of the time, so I am the subject of these creations too.
As we record today, your channel has 136 published videos, which is quite a lot. And the first was created in November 2021. What have you learned about motorcycle content creation, do you think, since you published that first video?
I don't think I learned anything. I just making the videos as they come. I just ride somewhere. I always take my cameras with me. Usually I don't have any plan, so I just want to ride for fun. But when I found something interesting or something interesting happening to me, I just start the creation in my head. This might be some interesting for me, most likely, to work with, because when you have the footages, you have to work a lot, usually, to get something watchable. And when I see some opportunity in some new creation, then I just start to focus on the camera angles, and, everything of the process kicks in. When nothing happens, I just have a wonderful riding on a motorbike.
So does that mean as you're riding along, you're already starting to think about what kind of film you might edit and make?
Yes, usually there are three versions of motorbike riding. Because for me, all the time, the motorbike riding is the first. So I never ride, or maybe once or twice did that kind of ride that I want to record this specific track. Just like the example what we were talking about. But mostly I just want to ride. I all the time take at least one camera with me, even if I do some chores or shopping or some commute. Maybe never know what might happen. And usually on these 1 day or 2 day rides, when I ride, I take all my cameras and, I just have a track which I usually follow, not all the time. And yeah, I start recording the camera from the beginning. And as I said, when something happens, I start to compose it. I start to think what might look. So, for example, when I found some interesting building, or I dropped the motorbike, or I find some interesting track part with its words to video from different angles, then I try to put the camera on, turn around, and ride back one more time or two more times, depending on the angles. And then I just continue the ride. And when nothing else happens that day, I just make a shorty. When something more interesting continuously happening, or I found another interesting perspectives, then I start to see it as one complex, longer video. The last version, when I just go out, just let the camera roll and cut later, I think never happened to me.
In a YouTube community post that you made 2 years ago, you said that you were planning to release a mix of content on your YouTube channel, and you specifically identified technical videos about your gear and any bike modifications that you've made, videos about riding style, riding tips and tricks, and travel videos. What content do you enjoy making the most? And what content generates most traffic for your YouTube channel?
I don't have any favorite because I like to do them all. They are all different, so I use my brain cells, different part of my brain for every other videos, and yeah, they just make fun for me. Even talking about some helmet or gear or riding tips and tricks or just some simple videos. This whole process is fun for me. There is no specific ones. And which makes the most traffic? It's easy to say. The big titles, For example, Lake Garda. This was probably my most watched video on the internet, and people are interested in my ideas about the motorbike specifics, because I had a video about the BraapT7 compared to other adventure motorbikes, and there were a lot of comments there and conversations, and yeah, people were arguing with me, and I like that. I like that very much.
Okay. Because the next thing I wanted to ask you is, in your experience, what's been the best part about running a YouTube channel, and what's been the worst part?
The worst part is you have to make videos. And video editing, I think it's not the most exciting thing, especially when you put together the basic cuts, the first cuts, because you have usually, even if you pre-planned the recording, you have a lot of footages, which is tremendous time to watch again all the boring stuff and everything to find the interesting ones. Yeah, they are mostly boring. And when you got the interesting parts already cut out, then you start to fit in the 10 minutes or 20 minutes limit of the YouTube, what is usually watched by the viewers. because when you make longer ones, they just don't watch it. And that part is already interesting again. When you can make the effects, when you can find the final cuts, and put it together with the music, that's again something creativity, and that inspires me.
Yeah, I've had a number of guests on the podcast who said basically the same thing, that the initial going through the footage and sort of categorizing it and deciding basically what's in and what's out it's necessary, but it can be really hard work. But I think as you get towards the end and you really just start to see what you've created, it's sort of become has a life of its own. That is when it gets satisfying. As a creator, do you find it relatively easy to watch yourself and edit yourself on film, or is that difficult? And the reason I ask is that a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't stand looking at myself or hearing myself." But I think if you can overcome that, it actually is really good, because then you can maybe start to improve and do better what you're trying to do. But what's your experience? Maybe you love to look at yourself on film. I don't know.
No, I don't, because I'm usually really unsatisfied with my hair, most likely with my hair. But yeah, the riding videos, when I have the helmets on and I have footages to ride the motorbikes, I like it, because not only because if something goes well, it looks good, but even when I miss something or I write horrible, I can learn from that. So I see there, maybe I gave too much throttle, the body position wasn't right, and such things. So learning opportunity too. And when something goes nice, I'm just kind of proud. Oh, look at there, how big jump I did. Oh, that really worked, and so on. And the other hand, the talking videos, when I watch myself talking, yeah, I'm not an artist in that way, so not an actor. And I didn't learn how to act in front of the camera. So yeah, it's kind of annoying, but I think it's acceptable.
Yeah, I think you have to get to a point where you accept that that's the way you look and that's how your voice sounds, and because that's something that I have always struggled with, with the podcast. Oh, that sounds awful, but you realize you have to get over it and concentrate on what are the bits that you're trying to improve. I mean, you do quite a lot of narration. I know you do some when you're driving, so sort of vlogging style in helmet capture, but you also do some narration that you add afterwards. So how challenging is that for you? How do you do it? Do you write it in Hungarian and translate it into English, or do you write it in English? What's your approach?
Well, let's talk a little bit about my inspirations, how I was inspired to, or how I started to decide what kind of video I want to make. So this vlogging style or the other style. First of all, I think Itchy Boots is the first woman who can find on the YouTube. And yeah, she is a vlog style narration writer. When she tries to, after narrating, it's just like listening a school teacher talking something. It's clever, but it's not really interesting. But she is genius in the vlogging style. So I tried that. I didn't really work for me, because talking on the spot, you must be really knowing the language, which I don't. And yeah, the other thing, I'm not always ready with the most interesting explanations. And the other person who inspired me a lot for the YouTube videos is Ed Marsh. and he uses this mix talking. So he is not great even in the real-time narration, the vlog style, but he is super funny at the after narration. And I found myself more comfortable with this style because on the spot is always more live. You can always reacting sincerely. When you drop the bike, you are breathtaking. Oh my God, what happened? You are nervous. People can hear it, even they don't see your face. And in the after narration, you have time to think about. If something is not really funny, you can think about something to make it more funny. And I think both sides of the narration is the best for me. And how I do it? I never use the Hungarian and translation thing because thinking Hungarian is totally different than thinking in English. So I have difficulties to find the right words in English. And when I do this after narration and I want to say something very sophisticated or something like that, I search for the words. Then I just watch the video and try to talk it over in English. Sometimes what I think, sometimes what I see. And I record it, I fail, then I roll it back and record it again and again and again until I find it adequate.
Do you write out a script or do you just do it?
I just do it.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's
I'm too
impressive.
lazy to write a script. I think it's a waste of time.
Okay. Well, I'm impressed that you can do that in you know, not in your mother tongue. That's impressive, because if I was trying to do that, well, I mean, I definitely have to write a script for the podcast, for the bits that I talk at the beginning. So wow. Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying about being able to ride along and say something interesting. I mean, there are some people who do it, but maybe they just never shut up and they just keep talking all the way through their lives like that. I don't know. I couldn't do it, but
I
yeah,
couldn't do it either. Especially when something is very exciting on the motorbike. I just had a really rough ride here in Italy last time. I just editing that video. And there I wasn't able to talk for sure. Even if I stopped, I wanted to say something, how excited I am, how stressed I am. Only several words came out because my head was full of stress and everything. I wouldn't be able to do that on narration style on spot.
But I think you do capture some talking in the helmet, don't you?
Yes, I try to capture as much as possible because I think it's a very valuable part of the editing.
Yeah. Well, it's fun also when you fall over and you swear or something like that. I mean, that seems real and genuine. I think I completely understand the logic, and I totally agree with it, the way that you mix the audio that's captured in the moment, but that you mix it with the narration. I think for your style of video filmmaking, I think that's absolutely the best approach to take. And I think it works as well because your humor comes through. And this is also another thing that I really like about your videos. I feel that you don't take yourself too seriously. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, it's true, because I'm not a serious person at all. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it definitely comes across, and I think that's what is definitely some of the appeal, is that you're clearly very competent with this big bike, and quite intimidating for those of us who just ride road bikes and are very sensible. So you're very competent, but also you're not taking yourself too seriously. You're having some fun and laughing at yourself, and I think that works really well. What's your current camera setup, and are you satisfied with it for the filming that you're doing?
Yeah, I think now I'm satisfied with it. I got these, let me see, here is one. It's a DJI Osmo Action 3. That's my main camera right now. I use it as helmet cam. And I got this Ace Pro camera. I don't know the brand.
Ace Pro, is that Insta 360?
Yeah. I use it for vloggings, but mostly side roads recordings. When I put up the stand, put on the camera, turn around, going back and ride again, for the cut scenes of the videos. Because I think the pure camera recording of the track is not full. So sometimes you have to show yourself from the outer perspective. And not just for the show, but even it helps to put the whole ride into the context of the riding.
Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, and I've been trying to figure out a way of talking about it. And the way that I've been thinking about it is as a language. It's sort of like just like we have languages, English, Hungarian, Italian, whatever. Filmmaking has a language that has conventions. In other words, we all have a sort of a common understanding of how film is communicated to us as humans. And most of the time, actually, it's through lots of different angles and shots. It's not just like a helmet camera all the way down a track. And when it is just a helmet cam, I think we, as humans, we start to get a bit bored with that and frustrated because we're used to being spoken to in film in a different way with lots of different shots. I mean, does that make sense to you?
Yes, totally, just like that. Because I think the only one perspective camera movie ever worked is the Blair Witch Project. But even when you watch it, there are several selfie videos in that, and even some report videos at the beginning. And without that, only filming it first person view wouldn't work at all. So first you must make the whole context, so say, the whole world build up, and you need the extra shots for that. And then the narration and the story can go through the main camera from the helmet.
Actually, I saw a film not so long ago. It's I think it's a 2023 film called The Zone of Interest, and it's based on the life of the German Auschwitz camp commandant Rudolf Höss. And the thing that's interesting about it is it doesn't really follow those normal cinematic conventions or filmmaking conventions. And so we see different shots, but they tend to be just like a camera stuck on a tripod in the corner of a room. And it's very eerie to watch because it's not following that language of filmmaking that we're used to watching. And it's an interesting film, but if anyone's interested in developing their filmmaking, I think it's a really good example of bucking those conventions and really challenging people. It's not so easy to watch, and thinking about why it's difficult to watch. But yeah, it's obviously a fairly dramatic topic as well. But from a filmmaking point of view, I think it's an interesting thing to look at. I know that you use a lot of 360 camera footage in your films, and I've heard that it can be a challenge in post-production because the files get to be so large. I think they're 8K often. But how have you found dealing and making films using the 360 camera?
Yes, 360 cameras are the devil of filmmaking, I think. So I think it's a must-have, but it's a pain in the butt to work with it. And yeah, for filming, it's very good because you can just cut it after the shot. So if the angle wasn't right, then you can change it and everything. But when you're working on it, not only the size, but even the handling of the camera in the editors are difficult, and you must set a lot of sliders and things, and it's kind of boring. But once you got that 5 to 1 whatever seconds, then it hits. So it hits really hard that it's fast, it's moving, it's dynamic. even sometimes makes your tummy hurt because it can be a rolling effect too. So it's a must-have if you want to make something really dynamic scene, I think.
I think what's been quite good, like you've used it with some of the rallies that you've participated in, and the great thing is that we get an idea of what it's like riding on the rally in a relatively interesting way, because you're able to move the camera around. And you, of course, wouldn't be able to do that if you were having to stop and put a tripod up with a camera and stuff like that. So it at least it gives a bit of variety. You know, we talked about that earlier. The eye doesn't get quite so bored because the camera is moving. You are able to provide different shots, but within the context of a race, and so that's quite good. Just a couple of last questions, and you touched a little bit on this earlier. I mean, you mentioned Itchy Boots and Ed Marsh, but what other filmmakers or YouTube channels do you take inspiration from yourself?
I think Billy Bolt vlogs are very interesting. Billy Bolt, you know, the hard enduro rider, he's kind of super champion of this show riding enduro thing when they are riding over obstacles and so very fast. And he has a vlog, and it's I don't watch too many vlogs, to be honest.
Okay.
But his vlogs are very raw. I think that's the right expression for it. So the cuts are occasionally, sometimes the video angles are horrible because he usually doesn't care. He just talks his bubbling things into the camera without any control. Very short shots from the paddock, seemingly uninteresting things, but the whole composition is kind of neo-avant-garde. How to say that? But it's working because you can see his perspective of this very hard event, and without this specific nervous style. Yeah, I think that's good to say. You wouldn't understand how stressful is this weekend when he does these races. So he's one inspiration too.
Anyone else?
Yes, I watched Runa's videos on YouTube, and her videos are just perfect, and they are just perfect every way. And she is nice, she is dynamic, she is young, and you know, I still cannot be inspired by her videos to making my videos because her style is so much different of mine, and her perspective is so much different what I want to express myself, or how I want to interpret my connection to the motorbike riding.
My final question, it's my famous final question, which is, from your own experience, does the filmmaking enhance or diminish the pleasure of a motorcycle ride?
I think it just adds to it. So when I have a very good day of motorbike riding and I enjoy riding the most, I just don't care about the filming. So I just ride and enjoy whatever comes. For example, I find some new track and I enjoy to ride it because the difficulty, it gives challenge. I just ride. And I don't care about filming. When I go out and it's an easy day, but I see a very good scene where I can find some beautiful shots and everything, then the riding is, well, let's say it's a bit boring. But when you make the shots and you make these videos and you have this sensation of creation of a video, adding your creativity, whatever you still have, and it gives a plus to the motorbike riding. So it always depends on how it comes out.
Thanks so much for being my guest for this episode, Kate. Other than your YouTube channel, where else can listeners find you online?
Thank you very much to be here. And yeah, other than the YouTube channel, I have only the Instagram profile with the same name. You can search for it, and I would really appreciate if you would follow me there too.
Great. Thanks again. I really look forward to seeing how your channel develops, the films you make in the future. Please take care and ride safe.
Yes, I will. And I will post more from Italy in the next years. Thank you so much. Ciao.